I'm Laura Weymouth, and my novel, The Castle and the Cloister, is August Goldsboro Fellowship pick. Today I'm here to answer some questions about the book and about my writing process. So to start off, what inspired me to write The Castle and the Cloister? So The Castle and the Cloister, from the time I started drafting it until it hit shelves, took 13 and a half years to develop. I started writing it because I had recently had my first daughter. She was about 6 months old. I was just coming out of the fog of exclusively breastfeeding a very high needs baby. And I wanted to write about that because it was such a transformative and all-consuming experience, and I'd never seen it in fiction before, much less fantasy, which, as we all know, tends to skew away from parenthood in general. So I decided I was going to write a book about a character who was a wet nurse. I am a former medieval and Renaissance studies major, and it always fascinated me how the occupation of wet nurse gave women access to seats of power which they otherwise would have been completely separated from for their entire lives. So it all grew out of the question of, what if a wet nurse entered a royal court and turned out to have a prodigious gift for political intrigue? Do I have a writing routine? I would not say I have a writing routine. My writing stems out of necessity. And as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. I have always written because, as you heard, I started this book when my oldest daughter was 6 months old, while simultaneously raising small children. My oldest is now 14 and my youngest is 2. So I've really been in the throes of early motherhood throughout the entirety of my writing career so far. I have 6 other books in print, and have been writing The Castle and the Cloister in the background of cultivating that career and raising my children. And I am technically a fully stay-at-home parent who works in the margins of that lifestyle. So this stuff all happens sort of before the kids wake up, during nap times, if those happen to be something that's happening in that era of my life, or after their bedtime. So there's a lot of just squeezing writing time in anytime I'm ever able to, and that's how I make things happen. I did send all of my queries for my first novel that was published using the toilet as a desk while my children were in the bathtub. So you make it work. Who was my favorite character in The Castle and the Cloister to write, and why? That is a great question, strictly from a standpoint of who do I empathize with the most and who do I relate to the most. That's absolutely going to be Fia, whose portrait you can see here. Fia is by far and away the most similar to me temperament-wise of any character that I've ever written. So she's very, very easy to put on page for me. It's not difficult at all to get into her headspace. She's very simple to work with for me, and I really enjoy that. She's very intuitive to write. But as far as my favorite character to write from a standpoint of just being fun, I would have to say the priest, because he's such a fascinating and complex character and has, as you'll continue to see in the sequel to The Castle and the Cloister, The Starlight and the Flame, just this immediate chemistry with everybody that he's in a scene with. You put him in a scene and sparks fly, so he's really, really fun to write from that standpoint. How did you approach world building for The Castle and the Cloister? So as I mentioned, I am a former medieval and Renaissance studies major, and this is a story that's set in a world roughly analogous to the Renaissance period in, Italy around the Mediterranean. It's similar vibes. So I drew a lot of inspiration from that. I didn't have to do a ton of research because I have, a fairly broad base of background knowledge in that regard. I drew inspiration from the 200 Years' War, from the Protestant Reformation and the great religious upheaval and schisms that were happening during that time, because there are 2 very divergent religions clashing with each other throughout this book. And one thing I like to do just for fun, strictly speaking, is to watch and read things that have a similar vibe to whatever I'm working on. So I read the Cushiel's Legacy series while writing The Castle and the Cloister, and I watched the Borgias as well, just strictly for costuming, vibe, political intrigue, which was delightful. And that's how I approach world building for The Castle and Cloister. I do often, if I come to a little detail of world building that needs, for me to go down a research rabbit hole, I will do that whenever I need to. And that's always a fun part of the process. And a lot of the time, as writers, we research to the nth degree something that is mentioned in passing in one sentence, and that realistically no reader is going to call us out on if we get it wrong, but we like to know that we got it right. And so I do a lot of that sort of research. Describe the castle and the cloister in 3 words. And so if I were to describe the castle and the cloister in 3 words, I'm going to cheat and give you 2 options. I would choose either angry pacifist nuns or matriarchy versus patriarchy. So take that for what you will. And I really hope that you enjoy the book. I always say I hope that you love reading it as much as I loved writing it, because I really, despite the fact that it took 13.5 years, loved every step of the process of developing this story. So again, I hope you enjoy it. Bye now.